Now let's talk about the life cycle of a project. Any project has a start date and an end date. This also means that any project has a life cycle which aims to describe the general organization of a project. The life cycle of a project facilitates the initial preparation of the project by defining the logic of its development. So it is a life cycle which is made up of 5 phases or stages, which are the initiating phase of the project, the planning phase, the executing phase, the monitoring and controlling phase, then finally the closing phase. So now let's talk about the details of these 5 phases or stages of the project life cycle. Let's talk about the initiation phase of a project. The initiation phase is the first stage in the project life cycle. This phase aims to define the project, develop the business case, and get it approved. It is during this phase that the project manager will have to carry out a feasibility study of the project, create a project charter, identify the main project stakeholders, and sometimes select the various project management tools that would be used during the project. The feasibility study makes it possible to determine if the company has all the resources necessary to successfully carry out the project. It also helps in determining whether the project will bring added value to the company. Here we are talking about the concept of return on investment. Meanwhile, a project charter, on the other hand, is a formal document, usually short, that describes the project in its entirety, including its objectives, how it will be carried out, and the various stakeholders involved. At the end of this phase, the project manager should have a somewhat clear understanding of the purpose, objectives, requirements, and risks of the project. Let's talk about the planning phase of a project. Once the initiation phase is complete, the project can then move to the planning phase. This planning phase is essential to create a project roadmap that the whole team can follow. It is at this stage that all the details are exposed and the objectives are defined in order to meet the requirements of the client company. In general, during this phase, the project manager will have to create a project plan, develop a plan to manage project resources, define project objectives and performance measures, explain roles and responsibilities to project team members, anticipate risks and risk mitigation strategies. The next phase after the planning, which is the project execution phase, usually starts with a kickoff meeting where the project manager outlines the project objectives to all parties involved. But before this meeting, there is a lot that the project manager absolutely must do during the planning phase. So first of all, he must define the vision and the deliverables of the project. He must therefore define a common objectives for all and what must be done at what moment of the project. He must identify team members and define their roles in terms of who does what in the project. This requires creating a detailed list of team members and providing contact information for each in order to facilitate communication during the project. He must develop an initial project plan. He also must define the measures of success for the project. This will determine how the project will be measured, what will make it successful. So for that matter, it is therefore necessary to define the expectations of the project from the beginning to the end. He must identify potential risks and bottlenecks. He must prepare the team for possible obstacles and put in place a whole process to eliminate them quickly. He has to set up the logistics for communication within the team, how to keep each other informed. This will involve establishing a consistent process for scheduling daily, weekly, or monthly meetings and determining which technology to use for communication purposes. He will have to choose a work process or a project management methodology in order to determine the best practices the project team should follow during the realization of the project. He also has to decide which tools to use, so he has to make sure that everyone in the project has the right tools and knows how to use them in order to complete their task or carry out their tasks in a successful manner. And then finally, he will have To schedule the kickoff meeting, the whole project team and stakeholders must be present at that meeting, even by phone or via video conference. You will have to set up the agenda and prepare the slides for the kickoff meeting. So these slides, you will have to send them before the meeting so that everyone can prepare and give everyone the slides after the meeting for reference purposes. Let's talk about the execution phase of a project. The execution phase is the main phase of the project. During this phase, the deliverables are developed to ensure that the expectations of the project are met. It is therefore at this stage that we will use most of the resources, namely time, money, human resources, in order to produce the various deliverables of the project. So as mentioned previously, a kickoff meeting is organized in order to mark the official launch of the execution phase. That kickoff meeting agenda may include the following. So it may include the project team member introductions, determining exactly who's who and who does what in the project. It may include another slide talking about the context of the project to explain why this project was launched, what are the project goals and objectives and all of that. So during the meeting, we will also have to talk about the scope of the project. That is to say that what exactly are we going to do in the project? What type of work does the project involve, for example? In the kickoff meeting, the project manager would also have to talk about the project plan. In this part, you as a project manager are going to explain how you are going to get the project done from start to finish. Or basically, you will have to present the roadmap of the project. You are going to talk about roles, make it clear who is responsible for which element or which activity of the project. You also have to touch on the point of communication, talking about the different communication channels you will use throughout the project, what kind of meetings or progress reports should the project team expect. And then regarding the tools, you will be able to give a presentation on the tools that will be used to carry out the project and how will they be used. Then you will have, as a project manager, need to mention the next steps of the project, clearly stating what steps needs to be taken immediately after the kickoff meeting. And then at the end of the presentation, you can allow a question and answer session, asking those present at the meeting if they have any questions. Then you can answer the questions that will be directed to you concisely and precisely. Let's talk about the monitoring and controlling phase of a project. This phase coincides with the execution phase. As the project progresses and deliverables are being produced, the project manager must ensure that all moving parts of the project are moving in the right direction at all times and in a coordinated manner. He must monitor and control the progress of the project to ensure that everything is progressing as planned in terms of respecting the schedule, the budget, the scope, and the resources. So if the project plan needs to be changed due to unforeseen circumstances or a change in management, for example, those changes take place during this monitoring and controlling phase. So during the monitoring and controlling phase, the project manager may have to manage project resources. He may have to monitor project performance, monitor the tools and processes used in the project. You may have to manage project risks, organize project meetings and produce project progress reports, update the project schedule, edit or update project plans. So that at the end of this phase, all agreed upon project deliverables must be completed and accepted by the client. Let's talk about the closing phase of a project. The closing phase is a key step in the project lifecycle. It is a period of reflection, conclusion, and organization of project documents, and it marks the official end of the project. During this phase, a summary is made of what went wrong and what went right. Lessons to be learned from the project are identified, as well as things to be avoided in future projects. During this phase, the project manager will make an inventory of all project deliverables. He will have to tie up loose ends. Sometimes, or most of the times, he will have to hand over the project to the client or to the team that will be responsible for the day-to-day operations of the product or service resulting from the project. As a project manager, you will have to conduct a retrospective meeting on the project to discuss and record lessons learned, and that can be used for future projects as well. You will have to organize all your project documents in a centralized location for them to be easily accessible by the other project team members or any other person that would need them in the future. So during the closing phase, project manager will have to inform the various stakeholders and the management team of the success of the project. And you will also have to disband the project team so that everyone can move on to other activities. And finally, if you have the chance, you can celebrate the completion of the project and thank the team members for working on the project and making it a success. So these were the 5 stages of the project life cycle.